Just imagine, a young man who was born to be the king of a powerful empire, the son of Julius Caesar, the most famous man of his time, and Cleopatra, the queen of Egypt. His name, Caesarion. He had everything he needed to be immortal in history, to live as a great ruler, but instead he ended up becoming part of one of the most tragic and dramatic stories of all time. How did this happen? Now, imagine yourself in his place. You, the heir to two of the greatest names in history, with all the power in the world at your fingertips, but suddenly everything starts to fall apart. Political conflicts, betrayals and power plays, which at first seem to be nothing, start to swallow you up, and you realize too late that your destiny is being decided by others. What happened to Caesarion was something that many tried to avoid, but no one managed to. What about you? Have you ever stopped to think if, like him, you might also be walking a path where not everything is as it seems? In today's video, we'll discover the story of the last pharaoh and understand the tragic end of Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. A story that will make you think, are we all really in control of our destiny in the end? If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, take advantage now to be part of our community. Every interaction you make makes this space more special. The birth and childhood of Caesarion Alexandria, the vibrant heart of Egypt, shone with its streets filled with merchants, scholars and sailors from all corners of the known world. It was a fascinating metropolis where the golden sands of the desert met the blue waters of the Mediterranean Sea, and where colossal monuments stood that reflected the power and wealth of the Ptolemaic dynasty. In this city, a kaleidoscope of cultures and conspiracies, was born one of the most intriguing figures in ancient history, Caesarion, son of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. The year was 47 BCE, when the world welcomed Ptolemy 15 Philopator Philometor Caesar, the imposing name that symbolized his lineage as the last of the Ptolemaic pharaohs, and at the same time a direct link to the throne of Rome. But the world would not know him by that name. The nickname Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar, sealed not only his inheritance, but the burden of a destiny marked by the ruthless politics and power plays that shaped the Mediterranean. Caesarion's birth was not just the fruit of a romance between a cunning queen and a legendary general. It was a political event loaded with symbolism and destabilizing potential. Cleopatra, an intelligent sovereign and skilled strategist, knew full well the value of her son. She saw him as the bridge that would unite two civilizations. Julius Caesar, even in death, still inspired loyalty and fear, and Caesar's blood ran in the boy's veins. But to Rome, especially to those aspiring to power after Caesar's assassination, Caesarion was a living, breathing threat. From the beginning, Cleopatra wrapped her son in a mantle of divinity. In a spectacle carefully staged to impress and intimidate, she presented him to the world as the embodiment of Horus, the Egyptian god of the sky and kingship, while she herself assumed the role of Isis, the mother goddess. Imagine the scene. Cleopatra, dressed in a resplendent ceremonial robe, lifts the infant Caesarion in her arms, her eyes radiating power and mystery as kneeling crowds murmur reverent prayers. The symbolism was unmistakable, mother and son as living deities, ruling by divine right. But the world around Caesarion was far from safe. The palace in which he grew up was a world of unimaginable splendor, with lush gardens, marble columns, and halls filled with magnificent tapestries. Yet every shadow hid intrigue, and every corridor echoed with the whispers of political conspiracies. As the boy played among the sculptures and fountains, the winds of change blew with force, bringing threats from Rome and the world beyond. When Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, the axis of global power shifted violently. Rome was plunged into civil war, and Cleopatra, with her unparalleled political skill, needed to act quickly to ensure the survival of her son and Egypt. Then Mark Antony entered the picture. A man as impetuous as he was charismatic, Antony became Cleopatra's lover and ally. Together, they formed a dangerous and passionate alliance that would challenge the Roman order and place Caesarion even deeper in the eye of the storm. For Caesarion, childhood was a constant dance between privilege and danger. He was taught by the greatest philosophers and surrounded by luxuries few could imagine. But in his young mind, the weight of the name he bore could not be ignored. What did it mean to be Little Caesar? Would he be a bridge between two cultures or a spark capable of setting the world ablaze? Growing up with such monumental expectations would shape his life and ultimately push him toward a destiny he could not avoid. Have you ever imagined what it was like to be born with the burden of legacy before you could even speak? To grow up knowing that your every move was watched by eyes expecting greatness or tragedy? Young Caesarion, innocent and full of promise, was an essential piece in a deadly chess game that few would survive. Prepare to learn the next act of this fascinating and tragic story. Caesarion's rise and fall is only beginning. What did the future hold for the one who carried the blood of the conquerors? Stay with us to find out. Rise and decline. The fate of Caesarion, son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, was written in the stars, but also in the hands of powerful men who shaped the course of history. Imagine for a moment the weight of a name that carried within it the promise of glory and the threat of destruction. As the heir to two civilizations, he was elevated to a throne of nearly impossible expectations. What happens when one's own blood is both a banner of power and a death sentence? After Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, the Roman Republic collapsed in a whirlwind of chaos. The streets of Rome became the scene of dark conspiracies, and the halls of the Senate echoed with whispers of treason. As factions fought for power, Cleopatra saw in Caesarion the only hope of securing Egypt's autonomy and greatness. To her, he was not just a son, he was a living symbol of the power that could unite two of the world's greatest powers. Cleopatra, known for her sharp wit and ability to manipulate hearts and minds, made a bold move by declaring Caesarion the rightful heir to Julius Caesar. The boy was given the title Ptolemy 15 Philopator Philometor Caesar and recognized as co-regent of Egypt alongside his mother. This move was a direct challenge to the power of Rome and a threat to those who wished to maintain absolute control over the Roman world. However, a new force was emerging. Octavian, Caesar's great-nephew and adopted son, was coldly ambitious and ruthlessly determined. He saw Caesarion as a real threat to his rise to power. This was not just politics. Caesarion was an uncomfortable reminder of the love between Caesar and Cleopatra, a bond that crossed borders and challenged ideals of Roman purity. For Octavian, this boy could not be simply ignored. As the struggles for power intensified, political tension reached a fever pitch. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, teamed up with Mark Antony, the Roman general whose bravery and passion were as legendary as his lust for power. Together they formed an alliance that was both political and romantic, using Caesarion's name to bolster their claims. Mark Antony proclaimed Caesarion King of Kings, reinforcing his open challenge to Octavian's authority. Picture a grand scene, the main hall of the magnificent palace in Alexandria, where Cleopatra and Mark Antony, dressed in ceremonial robes, presented Caesarion to the world. Beneath arches decorated with gold and lapis lazuli, the boy was paraded as the future of East and West. The crowd murmured in reverence and awe, while foreign emissaries watched his every move, knowing that this display of power would only further escalate the coming war. But the tide of fortune does not always favor the bold. In 31 BC, Caesarion's fate was sealed on the waters of Actium. The epic battle between the forces of Mark Antony and Cleopatra against Octavian echoed like thunder across the Mediterranean. Colossal ships, packed with oarsmen and soldiers, clashed in a fierce conflict. Under the relentless sun, the waters were transformed into a graveyard of wood and iron, and smoke from the burning ships colored the sky. The defeat was devastating. Mark Antony and Cleopatra fled, leaving Caesarion's fate to the mercy of implacable enemies. Cleopatra, in a last-ditch effort to ensure her son's survival, tried to negotiate with Octavian. She knew that her wit and charm could be powerful weapons, but Octavian was an opponent of ice and calculation. He didn't need persuasion, he needed absolute power, and Caesarion was a piece to be removed from the board. Now imagine the weight of fear in the heart of a young man who had never had a choice about his role in history. Caesarion, born to rule, was now prey on the run for his life. He was not just an heir, he was a ghost from the past that needed to be erased. What does it mean to live with the knowledge that your very existence is considered a threat? As you reflect on this inevitable tragedy, think about the fragility of power and the price one pays for dreaming of glory. What sacrifices would you make to protect your legacy? Brace yourself for the finale of this story, a conclusion where drama and tragedy reach their final climax. Don't miss the final moments in the saga of Caesarion, Little Caesar, whose brief life left an indelible mark on world history. The tragic end. Imagine for a moment the uncertainty of living in a world where your very name is synonymous with danger. The destiny of Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, was marked by intrigue and betrayal from the moment of his birth. He was the heir to two of the greatest empires the world has ever known, Rome and Egypt. From an early age, his existence symbolized both a promise of unity and a threat of fatal division. But it was after the Battle of Actium, when his mother and Mark Antony fell from grace, that the chains of power began to close around him. How could a young man, raised under the auspices of a glorious future, escape the deadly shadow that now haunted him? The answer? He could not. Cleopatra, queen to the end, knew that the fall of Mark Antony meant the end of her political aspirations. But her love for Caesarion and her fierce desire to protect him led her to orchestrate a risky escape. Knowing that Octavian was an implacable enemy and that Caesarion posed a direct threat to her control over Rome, the queen sent her son south in the hope that he would find refuge deep in Nubia, where Egyptian ties still held sway. The idea of hiding the prince was her last desperate move on a chessboard, where the pieces were moving too fast to control. Caesarion, accompanied by loyal guardians and guards, set out under the scorching desert sun. Their journey was a race against time and against fate. The relentless heat, the inhospitable landscape, and the constant fear painted the picture of an escape that left no room for error. As they walked, each step brought the promise of freedom and the unbearable weight of uncertainty. The young heir, only 17 years old, carried the burden of generations on his frail shoulders. But news, like the desert wind, travels fast. Octavian, now victorious and imbued with absolute power, understood that Caesarion's existence was a risk he could not afford. He was not a man of half measures. His decisions were calculated with surgical precision. As he consolidated his hold on Alexandria, carefully planted rumors offered clemency and protection to those who would surrender. Cleopatra, a seasoned politician and master of deception, sought to buy time. She knew that Octavian's promises were nothing more than empty words, but time was all that remained. And Caesarion? Imagine the terror of a young prince who, for the first time, felt the full weight of his inheritance. Raised amid the gilded luxury of Alexandria and under the tutelage of the greatest philosophers and strategists, he was now cornered by forces beyond any lessons learned. The cold desert nights, The nervous glances of his guards and the disturbing silence all around him formed the backdrop of an inevitable fate. Who was left to trust? Where was there still safety when the gods seemed silent and men treacherous? The end came, like the thunder before the storm. Caesarion returned to Alexandria, perhaps lured by promises of safety or compelled by the call of duty and blood. Capture was inevitable. There is no definitive record of exactly how Julius Caesar's last heir was taken, but his death carries the coldness of a famous phrase, "Two Caesars are too many." These words, attributed to Octavian, encapsulate the ruthless pragmatism of Roman politics, where there was no room for mercy. Now stop and consider, what would it be like to live a life where your name was both a blessing and a curse? Caesarion never had the chance to discover the man he could have been. He was a pawn in a brutal game, where his existence was both a promise of unity and a dangerous reminder of past alliances. Imagine for a moment the dreams cut short before they could even begin to blossom. What thoughts ran through his mind in those final moments? Who would you have been if fate had not robbed him of his opportunities? Caesarion's death marks more than the tragic end of a life. With him came the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, and Egypt ceased to be a sovereign nation and became a Roman province. The dream of a prince who represented the fusion of two civilizations was like dust in the wind. His story, however, lives on as a grim warning of the dangers of unbridled ambition and the unseen forces that shape destiny. If this story touched you, share in the comments. What did you learn from Caesarion's life and legacy? What thoughts does it spark in you? Let your perspective enrich the legacy of this tale and keep the story alive for future generations. Imagine the sands of time rushing inexorably toward the end of a dynasty. Caesarion, the last sun-king of Ptolemaic Egypt, now silenced by the order of Rome, was gone forever. But what remains when the life of an heir to the world is cut short so soon? What does his story tell us about the human cost of power and the fragility of legacy in a game where ambition, fear, and destiny weave the plot? History does not end with a sword. It lives on in the echoes of decisions. After Caesarion's death, Octavian, now Augustus, ruled with a firm hand and transformed Egypt into a Roman province. Alexandria, once the beating heart of a vibrant empire under the Ptolemies, became a jewel administered by Roman governors. The transition was brutal and definitive. The cultural brilliance, sovereignty, and dreams of union between East and West were extinguished. But the disappearance of a name does not erase its influence. Caesarion, the son of two titanic figures, is a constant reminder of how even the most promising fall victim to the tides of power. The cultural legacy left by his brief existence goes beyond what the history books tell. If Caesar and Cleopatra were icons of passion and politics, Caesarion is the symbol of youth crushed by expectations and the relentless logic of political pragmatism. A timeless lesson in power, reflecting on Caesarion's demise, leads us to question what truly constitutes a legacy. It is not just an empire conquered or held by force. The true mark of a leader lies in the seeds he or she plants for the future, not just momentary victories. Octavian may have won the war, but the memory of Cleopatra and Caesarion lives on to this day as a warning about the dangers of unbridled ambition. Consider the famous phrase attributed to Octavian when he ordered Caesarion's death, "Two Caesars are one too many." These cold, calculated words reveal a dark truth about the cost of centralizing power. Names like Caesarion's are erased so that others can shine. Have you ever stopped to think about what defines a lasting legacy? Does power alone justify the means, or is there something deeper that resonates across generations? Echoes in popular culture and modern history. The fascination with ancient Egypt and the Ptolemaic dynasty did not die with Caesarion. Centuries later, his brief and tragic life still inspires literary works, films, and academic debates. Authors such as George Bernard Shaw and contemporary playwrights have used the figure of Cleopatra to symbolize feminine beauty and cunning. But Caesarion remains an enigma. He is a piece of a historical puzzle that will never be completed, a ghostly presence that represents the lives interrupted by the struggle for power. In archaeology, Caesarion's tomb has never been found. Some believe that his body rests somewhere in the sands surrounding Alexandria, lost forever. This mystery fuels theories and debates. Was he buried in an inglorious tomb, or was his memory deliberately erased to reinforce Roman rule over history? Now, let's think beyond dates and facts. How often are we faced with expectations that seem greater than we are? Caesarion had no choice. He was thrust onto a global stage, his destiny written by forces beyond his control. What about us? How do we deal with the pressures and roles assigned to us? What lessons can we learn from a young man whose life was sacrificed on the altar of politics? If there is one thing Caesarion's saga teaches us, it is that power, without compassion or vision, destroys both the victors and the vanquished. The struggle for supremacy always leaves invisible scars. When we look back at our own journey, what marks are we leaving? Do our actions build bridges or reinforce walls? Caesarion's journey closes more than a chapter in Egypt's history. It challenges us to think about the nature of destiny, justice, and human ambition. When power becomes an end in itself, it consumes everyone around it. But when it is used to create, inspire, and unite, it becomes a beacon that illuminates generations. As we come to the end of this saga, I ask you, what are the legacies that truly matter? If you had to choose between fleeting glory and lasting honor, what would you choose? Leave your thoughts in the comments and share your ideas about what makes a life worth living. Your voice is part of the narrative, and each perspective helps keep the story alive. But before closing this chapter, I want to leave you with a very important thought. What happened to Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, is a great example of how destiny can change in the blink of an eye, and how the choices made along the way can define an unexpected ending. He had everything in his favor, a powerful lineage, the title of Caesar's heir, and even the chance to reign alongside his mother, Cleopatra. But in the end, he was caught in a trap of politics and treacherous alliances. What does this teach us? That no matter how many opportunities life gives us, we can never forget that destiny can be quite unpredictable, and that decisions, even the smallest ones, have a great influence on the future. So pay attention. Caesarion's story is a warning to us. Don't be fooled, because the world may seem favorable and full of promises, but traps are everywhere, often disguised as good opportunities. It is always important to evaluate situations wisely, know who is by your side, and understand that not everything that glitters is gold. The story of Caesarion, with all its drama and tragedy, shows that the greatest victories can turn into the greatest falls if we are not careful. Now reflect on everything we have discussed here, and remember, in life, it always takes more than just dreaming. It takes acting wisely, discerningly, and of course, having the courage to face adversity. Every choice you make, no matter how simple it may seem, can shape your destiny in ways you never imagined. Stay alert and continue to learn from the past, because it has a lot to teach you.